Good morning, everybody. Well, my tooth is still aching and I still got a headache, but it's morning and I have had a little breakfast. I had some leftover pizza and I had a beautiful apple crumble pie that my sister made for me, my sister Michelle, who is my youngest sister. And that was really nice anyway. It hurt a bit to eat it because of my tooth, but I did enjoy it, so thank you very much to her for that. She brought those things here yesterday when she brought my mom here, and we had a nice visit. We had about 3 hours of a visit, which was really nice. I hadn't seen either of them in a very long time. The stories I want to tell today are about my stay in the convent in Eganville, which if you're wondering what that's all about, you can go back and see other videos where I talk about it, about how the convent was haunted and how we came to be there and that sort of a thing. It was a shelter, is what it was, and we needed a place to go at the time, and that's where we ended up. The whole story is in some other videos anyway. Oh, pardon me. But it's cold in here right now, so I'm snuggled under the covers. My heater isn't working. I don't know what's wrong with it. I can't get it to light, so I'm kind of cold, but it could be worse. It's not happening in January at least, so I'm grateful for that. That would be terrible. But anyway, this Grey Nuns Convent was next door to the separate, Catholic school. I was a Roman Catholic back then. I haven't been a practicing Roman Catholic since the late 1980s. But in 1980, when I was 12 years old, I was a Roman Catholic. In fact, I was a very devout Roman Catholic. And so, of course, I went to the separate school next door, to the Catholic school. We used to call the Catholic school system was called the separate school system in those days. At least in Ontario it was. Now, I was there for about 6 weeks in May and June of 1980 when I was 12. My sister, who I just spoke of, who baked me the pie, was only 3 years old, and so she wasn't in school yet. And of course, my mom wasn't in school. She was an adult, so she wasn't in school. I was the only one in school. And my teacher, who was an older woman, kind of a short, stout, white-haired woman, whose name was actually Mrs. White. And I mean, I figure she's probably long dead now, so I don't have any qualms about saying her name in a negative context, because, it's not like she's going to be embarrassed or anything. She's gone. I'm sure she is by now, because that was over 40 years ago. Anyway, Mrs. White was kind of a harsh and mean-going person, and very kind of prejudiced, bigoted, and, I don't know, just generally not a very easy person to deal with. And I say, I don't know her story. Usually when people are like that, they've had a lot of hurt in their lives, and it's affected them that way. So I think we need to bear that in mind when I tell these stories, because she's not going to come off very good in any of them. But there's always another side, and we don't know what that side is. At least I don't. There may be somebody out there listening who recognizes her, the name, and who says, wait a minute, there was a Mrs. White that was a teacher at St. James the Lesser School in Eganville, Ontario, and I knew her, and she was actually a lovely person. But she would sometimes be the way she was, and if you knew her story, you'd understand. Maybe somebody will say that. I don't know, and that may very well be, because everybody's got a story. Everybody has their reasons for being what they are. Having said all that, I'm now going to proceed to trash Mrs. White. Well, I'm going to try not to do that, but I am going to tell what happened, and I mean, she isn't going to come off all that great. especially in this day and age when we kind of frown on prejudice and racism and nastiness, being the way people often were back then. We got to bear in mind that the things that she said were far more accepted in 1980 than they would be now. And I'm going to repeat some of what she said, and I want you to understand these aren't my words. I don't think this way, but in order to tell the story, I'm going to have to repeat what she said. So, just bear that in mind. Please don't judge me for using the kind of language I'm going to use here at times. I just can't tell the story without doing so. Now, my first day of school, Mrs. White introduced me to the class as the son of one of those whores living next door who had put the poor sisters out of their home because they couldn't keep a man, because they weren't woman enough to keep a man. That's basically what she said. And there was an empty seat in the corner of the room. It was behind a native Indian boy. You could tell he was a native Indian. He was dark-skinned, and he had the black hair, and he had the features of a native Indian, And she told me, she said, you can take that empty desk behind a filthy Indian boy if you can stand the smell of him. That's what she said to me. So I went down, now that I had been branded a son of a whore. I went down and sat in the corner with all the unapproved people, I guess, with the filthy Indian boy. So the son of the whore and the filthy Indian boy were lumped together in the back corner anyway. And I don't know who else was there, but I'm sure anybody in that vicinity was probably not a very good person in her estimation, and she wanted to lump all the troublemakers into one area so she could keep her eye on us. I suppose that's what it was, but that's just me supposing. I don't know. Maybe we were the only two miscreants there. But, and for the record, the little boy did not stink. Why, a little boy, I say, you'd be about 12 like I was. He wasn't really a little boy, but you know what I mean. He didn't stink, anyway. And, yeah. My first day there, when I approached the school, before I even met Mrs. White, I could walk up the street from the convent. It was just next door, from the old stone convent. And I go through the gate, and I'm going around the side of the school, and I'm looking into the schoolyard. And I thought to myself, oh my, what kind of a place is this? There was one great big guy, and he's laying in the dust in the yard, just laying there in the dust on his belly. And the guy looked like a beach whale. He was over 6 feet tall, this guy. And the school only went to grade 8. I was in grade 6 at the time. I was just finishing grade 6. And this guy, anyway, he looked just like a beach